Hi boys and girls, I'm excited to show you how to create a portrait inspired by our artist Bisa Butler. Now first, let's talk a little bit about quilting. So Bisa Butler is a quilter, and many of you might know that I'm a quilter as well. This is a quilt that I had made for my daughter, and I come from a long line of quilters. This is a quilt that my great-grandmother had made. And this actually is really neat because, well, both quilts have fabric from family members put in them. So there's fabric in here that my mom used to wear when she was little. There's fabric in here from my grandmother and from my father. So these are really special. Now, this quilt is very old, so I can actually show you on the inside of a quilt what's happening. On the inside of the quilt, there's something called batting, so it's really soft. So if you've ever felt a quilt, there's a top layer, there's a back layer, and on the inside, there's actually a nice soft layer, and that helps keep you warm. And this is the same thing that Bisa does. She makes her top layer, she does have a back layer, and she does put the batting in the inside, but hers are definitely artworks that hang on the wall, whereas these were things, obviously, that have been used. So let's take a look at how to get started. Now, this is my finished product, but how I got started was I used a photograph. If you don't have a photograph, that's okay. You can draw a portrait just onto a piece of paper, and I can talk to you about how to do that. But I do want you to know that just like Bisa, it's okay if you'd like to take a photo and you'd like to print it if you have that option at home. So this is the original photo that I started with, and what I did, I made it nice and big. That's one thing with working with the portrait, you are going to want to make it nice and big. So I printed this out, and then what I did, I brought it just right over to my window at my house, and I just traced on top very simple lines. And I made them a little bit darker and bolder with a marker so you could see, but I just traced with pencil in case I needed to make some adjustments. I just focused on the simple shapes. I really want you to think about that with this project, because what we're going to be doing is cutting up pieces of paper to make those shapes. So don't worry about a lot of little details. Focus on just the big stuff. You can notice I didn't even worry about these straps, just kept it nice and simple. So if you have the availability to do that, that's wonderful. You can go ahead and print something out, get your simple shapes, and then you'll be ready to get started. Now, who might you want to choose? You can choose yourself, you can choose a family member, maybe you have a favorite movie star. We're just doing portraits, so pick one person and zoom in on their face. Maybe a nice selfie that you have at home, maybe that's something that you want to do. So if you don't have a picture and you need help getting started on how to draw a portrait, you can continue watching. I'm going to use a crayon so that you can see better. I would like you to use a pencil to make sure that you know that you can erase. I won't be able to erase with my crayon. One of the things that I want you to get started with is the oval head. Now you might think circle, but I want you to get started with an oval because you'll need room for your hair. So that's a great place to get started. And take a look at this. We're not worrying so much about any details down here, or arms or hands or anything. When you make a neck, you want it to be wide enough. A lot of times people make really skinny necks. Make sure it's a wide enough neck. For a shirt, very easy. It's a smiley face. And then bring the shoulders to the edge of the paper. If at any point you feel like I'm going too fast, you can stop this video and go at your own pace. Now, when we make the face, we're actually going to be putting the eyes almost halfway in the circle, in between the oval. And you might be saying, Miss Sasso, that the hair's going up here, the eyes should be up here. If you make the eyes up here, it's actually going to be too high. So kind of find where your halfway mark is. You can even make a guideline if you want, if that's helpful. And then you can put your eyes in here. Sad face, happy face. Make a sad face, make a happy face. You can play around with this. You can look at whatever picture. Maybe you're doing a selfie, maybe you're doing a grandparent. Everyone's eyes are different. These might be too big, might be too small. You're going to have to look at what you are making. Then the mouth is going to go down here. You can start with the smiley face, but remember, we have lips. So you want to add a top lip and you want to add the bottom lip. And then we have a nose. And again, lips are different. Some might be bigger, some might be smaller, some might be wider, some might be skinnier. So you have to look at the top lip and the bottom lip and what shape they are. For a nose, what I always like to say is make parentheses. One over here, one over here. Again, maybe it's too wide, maybe you need to make it skinnier. And then the nostrils are just two curved lines like this. Then you can make your nose come up like that. You'll make a shape. If you take a look at this, it's going to actually be a shape that you're going to cut out of paper. So even if on your drawing, if you want to make it a shape, if that would be helpful to you, you can even make it a whole shape. For the eyes, you can start with a circle, but remember we have eyelids. And that will help soften them so you don't look too surprised. The ears are right here. And now all of this, that's where your very smart brain is up here, and that's also where your hair is. Or maybe you have a hat on. And that's where you're going to start thinking about what hairstyle, whoever you have, whoever you're drawing, are they long hair, short hair, kind of in between, again, a hat. So think about what you'd like to add. If you're stuck, you can always ask for help. You can always look online. There's a lot of different options. I'm going to start making some shorter hair. And I'm just kind of making lines because remember, this is actually going to be, if you look over here, this is actually just going to be one shape cut out. So this is just getting our sketch down of what we'd like to do, because then we're going to be cutting these out and making these shapes, or it's an option to cut them out. There's a couple different ways we can start adding the Bisa Butler fabric effect. So that's the basic way to get a portrait done for this project. You can add a whole bunch of details on here. What we're going to be doing for the paper effect or the fabric effect, you're going to be using whatever paper you have at home. If you have some old wrapping paper, that's what I used for the background for this. I have some striped wrapping paper. I colored this with colored pencil. This is regular paper. This I colored, or regular colored paper. This I colored with marker. And what you're gonna do is you're going to start scrunching it up, and it's going to be making it feel a little bit more like fabric. You're going to get a certain texture. Now, some of you might want to just color in your portrait, and maybe you want to add fabric where there's really fabric. So maybe you only want to make it fabric on the shirt, or maybe you even want to put a mask on. Maybe that's something that you'd like to add on your portrait right now, because that's something that's impacting our lives. Maybe you have some fabric at home that you've actually used before. Here's some fabric that I have, and I actually used for my portrait. I put a little fabric bow from fabric that I had from her quilt. And I also want to remind you to think about colors. When Bisa does her work, she thought about the colors that represented the person that she was creating. So my daughter's name is Violet, and this is Violet. And I kind of was inspired by Bisa's work because her grandmother's name is Violet, and she used a lot of purples for her work. So that's why I chose this. So I want you to think about that for yourself. The very first part of this project, as you know, right now, I just want you to focus on getting your portrait down or getting your picture printed and tracing some very simple shapes. So either way, how you do it is totally fine, but that's the first part of this project now. As we move forward, we'll be using different papers, but if you want, you can go ahead and get started and kind of make some fabric. If you have any doodles or designs, if you have anything created, you can start to color that. You can create your own fabric. You're kind of like a textile designer too with this project. So I think at this point, I'm gonna let you go so you can start creating your portrait. And remember, enjoy and stay creative. I can't wait to get started on the next step of this project.